Okay, why have I put these together? Well, they're both flagship synths that have got tons of options and flexibility and are both capable of huge, impressive tones. That was just a quick one I've copied from the Arturia to the Moog. Not the biggest, most impressive sound either of them can do, but I'm just trying to get ready for the demo, and before I lose that patch, I just thought I'd play it because it's really nice. And I think it shows them off quite well. It's not matched identically, you know, that's not the point of this. But why have I done it? So one is 9.7K in the UK and the other is 2.2K. So the Moog One is over 4 times the price. And for that, you get 4 times as many oscillators. You get 48 on the Moog 16 voice versus 12 on the Arturia. And you get 32 analog filters on the Moog, whereas you only get 12 on the Arturia. Obviously, it's got 2 filters per voice and there's 6 voices. You've got 2 filters per voice on the Moog, and that's got 16 voices. Other really obvious differences, the Moog One's got 3 synths there. You can actually have 3 synths playing at the same time. You can only have 2 on the Arturia. 3 would be a bit of a stretch with only 6 voices, wouldn't it? And obviously the Moog's got this nice big screen. But overall, not taking the massive amount of oscillators on the One, there's a fair bit of overlap. This one's on loan from Dan Sterling. He's a producer based in Manchester in the UK, so check out his links in the description below. A huge thanks to Dan for letting me play with his synth and leaving it here for the week. And my initial thoughts when I first played this in his studio was how much it reminded me of the PolyBrute. They're both expensive looking and very hefty synths. They both put together really well. They feel really well made. They both feel like showcase flagship synths. They both feel like studio centerpieces. They've got loads of flexibility. They've got VCOs. They've got 2 types of analog filters on each. They've got onboard effects, ARPs, sequencers, huge modulation matrices, or matrices, I should say. So both sort of fulfill the same or at least similar roles. So back to first impressions. On balance, I do prefer the look of the Moog. I don't know why, that's purely subjective obviously. It just looks a little bit more classic to me. It's laid out really well and it feels really nice on the eye. That's not to say I don't like the Arturia. I have bought this one, after all, it is mine. Both fit within their family though. The PolyBrute looks like an Arturia and the M1 looks like a Moog, which I think is quite important as well. On the downside to the Moog though, it does have a fan which is clearly audible. It's not distracting, a bit like a gentle PC fan really, but it's there, and if you're recording vocals you'll probably have to switch it off. I've got a lavalier mic on at the minute, so this clip-on mic, and you might be able to hear it if I lean over. So it is there, I can hear it, it's the only thing I can hear in the studio. It's not really terribly distracting, but as I say, if you're recording vocals or something, you might want to turn it off while you're doing that. PolyBrute is silent. The only thing that's as loud as the Moog actually is a Prophet VS I've got, and the transformer on that's really loud, and I can hear them both when that's on. But you know, so noises in studios aren't unusual things, but if you need it silent, as I say, turn it off. I think the keys on the M1 are nicer, they're longer, they're more elegant if I do that. They're a fair bit longer than the keys on the Arturia. In fact, after playing with this for a while and then putting it next to the Arturia felt like it had little stubby chubby fingers for keys, but I've got it next to the OB6 is above it. What have I got below it? The Prophet 5. So it doesn't feel small on its own. It's just these are sort of extraordinarily long on the Moog. The downside to that is though, is that you can hear them creak a bit. If I just turn the volume down. Where's the one? This one in particular, this C down here. So not all of them, but some of them. When you're using the aftertouch. The Arturia doesn't do that at all. Oh, let's turn that down as well. Oh, there you go, there's a little noise in there. but it's not something I've noticed, whereas on the Moog I have noticed it being a bit creaky. So look-wise, all in all, I prefer the Moog, and the only negatives so far from the Moog are the extraneous noises you're getting from it. Digging a little deeper then, from a functionality standpoint, the connectivity of the Moog One is much greater. We've got 2 CV ins and 4 CV outs on the back, as well as a sub output and a main output, so you've got 2 stereo pairs. The outputs can be used as sends for external effects, and the CV ins are modulation inputs. So although the VCOs aren't accessible in the mod matrix, you could perhaps use an external oscillator. I've not tried it, but it looks like it's an option. You don't have any of that on the Arturia. No CV ins, no CV outs. You do have sync in and sync out though. But the PolyBrute has this editor, which is extremely handy for finding out what's going on in the patch. You can see all the oscillator, filter, and envelope settings at a glance. And of course, you can go in and you can look at all the modulation routines. You can, do what you like here. You've got the global settings, you've got the individual patch settings. The Moog, however, does have this fantastic screen, and you get all sorts of information on this. That's the mod sections of setup. We click on the oscillators, we go into this more button and we get all the oscillator settings, same with the filter, same with the envelopes, and there's just so much stuff you can go in and edit, and it's all laid out really clearly. Even the sequences are shown a bit like you'd see them on Logic or in your DAW. But it doesn't have an editor, which I think are really handy, even if you only use them occasionally to see what's happening in a particular patch. Editing the synths on both is really easy, as I've just shown you. On the Moog, you've got all these morph functions, and you can go in and change stuff to set a modulation routing for an LFO, for example. Press the destination button and then just twist something. Similar on the Arturia. We go into the modulation section, push a button and twist something. So let's go to 6. So now modulation routing 6 is adjusting the key tracking. So really simple to do. The settings that you can see on these more functions on the Moog, look, every single section's got one. It's just so intuitive. We do have something similar-ish on the Arturia, where you press settings, and any of the settings that have got a little circle next to them, when you press settings and wiggle it, you go into all the settings for that particular parameter. But on the Mog One, I think it's probably the most intuitive interface on a flexible synth I've ever come across. Maybe the Iridium and the Quantum are similar, but this just really does stand out as very, very good. Arturia isn't lacking, it's just got a smaller screen, so there's minor bits of menu diving, but using these buttons here, you flick through the menus really quickly. So the differences here I'm looking at are between sort of 88% and 87%. I'm looking for points to lose. There's nothing bad about either of them, just the Moog seems a little bit easier, and I think that's purely because it's got the big screen and the individual buttons for the sections, rather than having to press setting. Press setting and clicking something's okay, but when it's a bit dark, you can't see which ones do or don't have the little circle, for example. But again, you're paying for each of the buttons, aren't you? You're paying 4 times as much. So that's my overall first impressions, and don't forget, I've only had the Moog One on loan for a week, so I'm not an expert on it. It's getting driven back to Manchester this afternoon. And my friend has had the PolyBrute on loan for a couple of months. He's now got his own, so that says something. But my muscle memory needs a little bit of a rewire to get back up to full speed with this one as well. But hopefully this will give enough of a feel of both to perhaps be of adequate use as a comparison to someone. So how's that for managing your expectations about what's to come? I think I'll quickly try to demo how they approach everything without going into too much forensic detail. But as I've got this patch up at the minute, I'll just turn it up. And I spent a little while trying to get these matched. It's given me a rough idea of how to go about showing you how they work. So yeah, first thing I think I'm going to do is just dig into this patch a little bit better, pull it apart and show you what's happening. This uses VCO1, VCO2 and a bit of sub. So VCO1, VCO2 and the subs in there. aftertouch on the cutoff. So on the Moog, to replicate that, we're going to use all three oscillators, oscillator 1, oscillator 2, and oscillator 3 as the sub. So here's the sub coming in. Oscillator 1, oscillator 2, with a bit of aftertouch on the cutoff. And you'll also notice there that it's a bit fuzzy, and that's because we're modulating the filter with some noise. So we look at the noise here and we go to modulate it, modulate the filter with the noise on the Moog, and you can't do it because you can't use any of these as inputs for the modulation section. Whereas in the Arturia, you've got noise to VCF here. That's noise modulating the filter. That's not noise coming in as a separate noise source or sound source. That's here. So that's noise going into the filter, and this is noise modulating the filter. You've got different colours of noise. Just a touch makes it sound a little bit fluffy, a bit softer. So it took me a while to figure this out, actually. So I contacted Geosynths because he's a bit of an expert at this, but by the time he got back to me, I'd figured it out, and he used the LFOs. The LFOs have got sample and hold. The LFOs can go super quick. So if we go into the modulation section, just show you this quickly. Ladder filter is being modulated by the LFO 1. But turn that up. Here it's being modulated by noise. We're going to the LFO itself. We've got all sorts of parameters in here. So range high, and that gives us noise rather than sample and hold. Sample and hold. So slow, low, medium, and high. You can vary these. You can do this with all the different shapes. Change that to for example to a triangle. Reduce the rate so you can see what's happening. I don't know if this is picking up on the camera, but that's now turned into a sine. Started off life as a triangle. Polarity, start, phase, sync on and off, sync divisions, all the sort of stuff you'd expect, but it's really easily accessible. And this thing here called smoothing, and actually I've used the smoothing on the noise in order to get it to be gentle enough actually. Let's put this back on high. Don't know why it's gone to a square, what I've done there. But on 0, it's just super noisy. So just softening it a bit and then adding a little bit extra in the modulation section. Whereas again, on the Arturia, just twist this knob. Made it sound too noisy now, let's turn that down. And you can hear I've got a little LFO modulating the pitch as well. Very, very gently. And on the Moog, because it's so flexible, so many options on there, to get it that slow or that gentle, I had to, I'll show you again, shall I just show that? Go back into LFO 2. So it's at 2.51%. If we go into LFO 2 itself, I've had to smooth that a fair bit. If I unsmooth it, so that's reduced the modulation further. I'm just showing really that you've got super fine control of everything on the Mog One. You've got loads of control on the Arturia as well. If you look at the LFOs, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, is it 7 different shapes? But you've only got 4 on the Moog, but you can change the triangle to a sine and everything in between it. So again, flexible, but different approaches to flexibility. And looking at the oscillators themselves, the Arturia is set between a sawtooth and a triangle. I'll just listen to oscillator 1. Let's open that filter completely, shall we? And there you go, it's set on a sawtooth to a triangle, but you can blend the triangle or the sawtooth to a triangle, and you can do the same on the Moog. On this, we listen to oscillator 1 on its own as well. That's on a sawtooth. Change the wave angle and it essentially turns it into almost a triangle. If we click on the more, we can see what's happening on the screen, perhaps. Or you can go to a full triangle. I'll look at the oscillators in a tiny bit more detail in a minute. Let's just bring this down again, have another little look at this patch. I'm actually sending the oscillators to both the ladder filter and the second filter, and all of them you can see the lights. Again, this is why I thought they were really sort of interesting to put together. We can see these lights here, that's taking or sending the oscillator to the state variable filter or the ladder filter or both, and you do the same on the Arturia, state variable, ladder or both. And on this it can be serial or parallel or anywhere in between. You blend between series and parallel. And on the Moog, you've got series or parallel. So again, slightly different approaches, but all quite flexible on both. And then finally on this patch, I think I'll just mention the effects. So it's a beautiful sounding patch, but I've had to take off some of the effects on the Arturia because it's got 3 effects per voice. So you've got modulation, you've got delay, and you've got reverb, and there's all sorts of other things in there as well. But you can have all 3 working at the same time, whereas on the Moog, you've got 3 different synths, and each of those synths can have a different effect and then a master effect, but you can't have more than 1 or suppose 2 effects on each of the synths. You've got its effect and the master effect. So on this, I've got a chorus and a reverb, and on the Arturia, I've taken off the delay that was originally on it. If I put the delay back on, I can't have the chorus, the delay and the reverb on the Moog, although the effects are Eventide effects on the Moog and they're absolutely stunning. So I could do much nicer effects than you can on the Arturia. I say nicer, just much more dramatic effects. Arturia aren't any slouch when it comes to effects. You know, look at all the soft synth and the like, but on this you've got things from the black hole from Eventide. So if I just go into that, let's go to the, I think it's on the master effect, I've got the reverb, yeah. So I'll put a longer decay on. Just fantastic, isn't it? That's going on forever. That's on freeze, on the decay. If we go into the effect type, so I'm in the Eventide halls there. Let's go to a shimmer. Let's just have a listen to what this does. I recognise the names from my H9 pedal. I'll just try and add a bit more effect to it. And there may well be in there that I've not found yet a decay with some reverb or reverb with some decay. But I'm not saying the Arturia are bad anyway, but I'm a massive fan of Eventide effects. So let's go into the reverb on this one. It's on Hall at the minute. We've got lots of different types there. Let's put it onto a bright plate. Dreamy, let's put it on Dreamy. It's like a shimmer. Beautiful, beautiful, but you know, the Eventide ones, they do have, I'm going into the more in depth on the effects than I'm meant to actually. Maybe I won't go through in the individual sections because I'm sort of doing it as I go through this patch, aren't I? But yeah, things like on the black hole with those sort of twisting, gnarly effects. If I try and find one of them, just to see what I mean. Eventide black hole. Oh, I love that. Or the map modulation, beautiful. But I'm not sure I'd spend the extra, what is it, lots of money on the Mog One for those effects, because I do have an H9 pedal. So I've got them all somewhere else anyway. Nice to have them on there, and they do make things sound absolutely spectacular. But as I say, these aren't bad in any way. Quite the opposite. But not quite as intricate as the Eventide ones. I did have a little play or think about matching patches. I mean, I matched the first patch from the Arturia to the Moog. On this one, big soft pad, it's a Matt Johnson patch on the Mog One. It's really simple. And I have been through the Moog and tried to think of what I can show on one versus the other, and why you can do more on the Moog. It's just really difficult because you keep on saying, oh, we can't do it. But here's a beautiful example. And to demonstrate the sheer unadulterated gorgeousness of having 16 voices, I've got this tone here. I'm only playing one synth on that at the minute, so it's just playing 3 oscillators. They are pretty similar, even though I'm playing different notes. Not matched anything perfectly because that's not the point of this demonstration, but on the Arturia there, I'm using 6 voices to play, I don't know, let's play a 6-voice chord. Very nice, got a little bit of reverb on there, has it? Let's put some reverb on. And on here. Not set the reverbs up perfectly or anything, but it's quite a nice tone. Well, it is a nice tone. Voice stealing. And I'm getting it there because I got synth 2 turned on, but if we listen to that, so that's synth 1, this is synth 2. It's coming out of a different speaker. If we put them both together, Wow. And if we look here, we're playing, well, is it 12 voices at once? So we've got 12 voices there. Synth 1's playing 2 oscillators, synth 2 is playing 3 oscillators. So we just don't have that capability on the Arturia. You can't play all those 12 voices at once. You can play 6. Doesn't sound the same as this though, does it? We do have the ensemble, which is a way of cheating. Things like the Korg Poly 6 have an ensemble to make it sound bigger and richer. That's definitely an improvement, but it's not this. Which is fabulous, isn't it? On the PolyBrute, we can stack voices. If I put this into stack mode, oh, it is, it's on layer there. So now I've got a slightly different patch on B than I have on A. So I can play them together, but I'll only be able to play 3 notes at a time. And of course, we're getting the note stealing on the PolyBrute that we're not getting on the Moog One. That is a fabulous tone, isn't it? Let's add some stereo spread on the PolyBrute. Take that ensemble effect off. That's really fabulous, isn't it? I could spend more time on the second tone on this, getting it a bit better. But one of the things that I noticed, again, you know, with the tuning that you've got on these 2 knobs here, on the Moog, it's just so much more flexible in order to get one of the oscillators 12 or an octave above the other, 12 semitones above the other. It's just really easy, just, you know, flick with the switches on this. I've got to sort of think about it. Then when I'm playing the patch, do I have to detune one of the patches by an octave to have something an octave higher, stuff like that. So, you know, obviously just easier with having 3 synths in one and dedicated controls for everything. Still nice though. So I think I said at the start, if I was going to go through every single function on this, it would literally take me hours and hours. So I think I'm going to call it a day there. I think I've shown a fair amount. I've not really compared sounds. As I say, it's really difficult to compare sounds, and I haven't got it for long enough to build up a big bank of patches that are similar on both, because they'd be similar on both anyway, and we can get them to sound the same. The big difference is the Moog, I think, is a bit more flexible in almost every way. The Arturia has got a lot of tricks up its sleeve that the Moog doesn't have, like those little things with the modulation, or what do they call it, on the ARP. But this has got the good screen, you can see everything that's happening. The more buttons are absolutely fantastic, but it does have the little bit of fan noise, and it's got creaky keys. I'm trying to be balanced here, you know, one's 9,500, one's about 2,200. For me personally, I've bought the PolyBrute because I could afford the PolyBrute, and it's great. It's the only synth I think I've got in my arsenal really that can do all this modulation, all these great modern style tones that I could afford. I've got the Prophet 5, that's for doing old school style tones. I've got an OB6, I mean that's got built-in effects. I've got a few vintage synths as well. I've got up here, I've got the Take 5, but I've not actually used that much. I should use that more often. It's got nice effects in there as well, 5 VCOs. But it fulfills a need or a space in the studio for something a bit more complex, a bit more modern, with lots of things that I can play around with and do. So if I'm doing something on the Prophet 5 and I want to add some more modulation, I can just pick it up on the Arturia. The Moog can 100% definitely fulfill that same space, but it's just too expensive for me. I'm not saying it's too expensive for what it is. I'm saying I can't afford one, which so probably like the rest of the world in that case. Would I maybe sell a few synths and just keep this? Well, if space was limited, actually, I'd really think about it. Space is limited, but not that limited at the minute. But I can see why people have this in the smaller studio in particular. You've got this, you've got pretty much a huge range of tones. You've got your 12 dB filter, you've got your 24 dB filter, you've got all those different envelope curves, those brilliant Eventide effects. You know, it's a fantastic bit of kit. But for me, the PolyBrute's the one that worked for me. It came within my price range and it does the bits that other synths can't do. So I hope that was of some use to somebody somewhere. I do hope I managed your expectations at the start. I just can't go through every single function. There's too much on the two of them. I mean, I think, did Loopop do one of each of these? And they're about an hour long probably. So it'd be, you know, trying to compare them, you're showing everything that everything does, then comparing them as well. It'd be about 3 hours long, which is ridiculous. Although I do say I've actually been standing here now for about 3 hours doing this. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please subscribe, ring the bell, check out Dan Sterling's site as well. He lent me this. Nice guy, good producer, based in Manchester. And I will see you next time.